Hi everybody, Matthew Turnage here, and today I thought I'd talk about an album that I found myself listening to a lot here recently, and that's Flaming Pie by Paul McCartney. Flaming Pie was originally released in 1997, hit number 2 in both the US and the UK. It's generally regarded as one of Paul's better solo albums and even one of the better Beatles solo albums overall, and I have to say it's a particular favorite of mine. So I just thought I'd walk through the tracks here real quick. What's interesting to me about this album is after the last two albums, Paul had put together a band to go touring again. Used that his touring band for both Flowers in the Dirt and Off the Ground. But when it came to this album, he dropped the band and got back to doing something he had not done in quite a while, which was recording a lot of the instruments himself, not really using studio musicians either. A lot of the album I think of as sort of being Paul's collaborations album, because a lot of the tracks are Paul and one other person, like Paul and Jeff Lynne on several tracks. You got three tracks that are Paul and Steve Miller. And of course, you've got Paul with Jeff Lynne and Ringo Starr on two tracks. So it's just Paul and a couple friends, some other studio musicians augment some other tracks with orchestrations or horns. But really, he keeps the personnel pretty limited on this album, and so I think it also harkens back to me a little bit to some of his earlier solo stuff. Some of the album has a little bit of the McCartney feel, just a couple tracks, but it definitely feels like a very much a Paul album where he's really asserting himself in a way that maybe I don't think he fully had at this point in several years. The album opens with the song we were singing, which was I thought a really nice choice for the opener on the album. If you saw my Beatles album openers thread or video, one of the things in that video that I talked about is how I like high energy album openers a lot of times. Like, for example, A Hard Day's Night was my favorite, and then I also really like openers like Back in the USSR, songs that are kind of up tempo and high energy. The song we were singing is not really one of those type of openers, but I think it sets the tone really well for the album. It's a really good way to kind of ease you into the mood of the album. Paul sings well on it, plays well on it. It's a great tune. Next up is The World Tonight, which was a big single off the album. I like this song a lot. And what was interesting to me about this song is the way in the verses Paul harmonizes with himself with the high and the low voice and sort of the difference in the pitches. When I first heard this, and knowing that Steve Miller contribute to the album, I had to check the liner notes. Is this one of the tracks Steve Miller's on? Because even though when you really listen, it's clearly Paul singing the two parts, but the way those harmonies work with the where he chose the high and the low parts, it to me feels like a very kind of a Steve Miller kind of where the way Steve would harmonize with himself on some of his older tracks. So I think that's a nice effect on that one. It's a really good song. Some good rocking guitars in there too. That's another thing that I like about this album. Some of the tracks, even though there's a lot of acoustic bass to the structure of the songs, a couple of tracks like The World Tonight, he put some good rocking electric guitar on top of it that really gives it some muscle. Third track is If You Wanna, and here we do get some Steve Miller on that, and some great guitar playing by Steve. Of course, it's a really good tune. Some Days is fourth, and I like that song a lot. That one has some George Martin string arrangements on it that really add to it. It's an interesting mood piece. It's kind of a bit of a darker mood, and even though a lot of the album, almost all the album, was written, and a fair amount of it was recorded before they got Linda's cancer diagnosis. That happened during the making of this album, and maybe some of it is looking back on it in hindsight, knowing that this was the last album that Linda would have any involvement in, that she would sadly pass away only about a year or so after the release of this album. There's some of that melancholy that's in the album, that shows up on some tracks like Some Days, and it's hard not to kind of interpret it through that feeling of knowing that the sad period that some of this album would be made under. And even though the song is not really about Linda or anything like that, but it just has that same kind of somber tone to it. Next up is Young Boy, another track with Steve Miller, great Steve Miller guitars, and I love how Steve sings along, harmonizing with Paul on that track. Great lyrics. It's one of my favorites on this album. I can't get enough of it. A great tune, and this is also a song that I find the older I get, and especially as I'm a parent. I know Paul was kind of thinking about his son as he's writing the song. Having children of my own, I can kind of find myself, I think, able to kind of tap in a little bit more to sort of some of the things Paul is thinking about in that song. But regardless, it stands out as a really great tune. One of my favorites of Paul's from the post anthology years. But as good as it is, the next track is even better. It's my favorite track on the album, and one of my favorite love songs Paul ever did, Calico Skies. Great guitar playing from Paul on this one, and it's really just Paul and his guitar. I love the lyrics. This was a song that was originally recorded in '92 with George Martin, and so it of course well predates Linda's illness, but it does have a really strong emotional tie into what happens with Linda. If you've seen the documentary that was made to go along with the album, In the World Tonight, and there's a bit of Paul in the studio doing a rendition of that song with Linda sitting right next to him as he's playing on the guitar, and every time I see that, it really it is very emotional for me to watch. But it's such a great song, and I love the lyrics. One of the things I love about Paul's lyrics is, if we're comparing him to John wrote a lot of songs about, himself, and you really, when you listen to John's music, it's about him, it's about what he's going through. So if you take something like the Double Fantasy album, all those songs, are directed toward Yoko or about Yoko. So listening to them, I find myself thinking, well, this is about John and Yoko. And even though I know in Calico Skies that Paul has Linda in mind when he's writing it, because Paul writes from a more a generalized perspective, it's easier to kind of put yourself in his own songs, or at least it is for me. And so I think of my wife a lot when I listen to that song. It's such a great song. Next up, Flaming Pie, the title track. Great fun rocker. Love the lyrics. It's all a bit silly and great playing on it. It's an outstanding track. That really, to me, is the best stretch on the album. That run right there from Young Boy through Flaming Pie, those three songs are really the peak of the album. Then we've got Heaven on a Sunday, which is another great song, and one of the last ones written, and this one written when Linda had received her cancer diagnosis. So when Paul is singing, if I could only have one love, yours would be the one I choose. And he and Linda are singing that together. She's got some very prominent backing vocals there. That really hits home. But of course, the most interesting thing about that track are the trade-off of guitar solos with Paul on acoustic guitar, his son James on electric guitar, and I really like those solos. I think they go together well. I think they play off of each other well. So that's a good track. Then we get "Used to Be Bad." Nice little blues jam with Steve Miller. It's a fun song. Kind of lighten things up after we've had a little bit more of a serious tone with Heaven on a Sunday, and so in that sense, it kind of there's a good flow there where we go like Calico Skies and then Flaming Pie, Heaven on a Sunday, Used to Be Bad. Paul's bringing us through some good moods there, good shifts in mood. Souvenir, another good song. Really like the orchestration on that one. Little Willow is Paul's tribute to Maureen Starkey, Ringo's first wife, who had sadly passed away shortly before this, and it's a really good song, a very heartfelt song. Really Love You is that's our first track with Ringo making an appearance on the album, and it grew out of a jam. And if I have to rank the songs on the album, or rank the songs on the album in order of preference, this would be my least favorite. It's a good song. It's a nice little jam, but it gets to be pretty monotonous. I think, at 5 minutes, if you trimmed a couple of minutes off of that, I don't think you'd miss it. Beautiful Night is another high point on the album. Again, Paul and Ringo together on that one, and it's a great song with a great melody by Paul. Love the orchestration again on that one. But what really is the best part of the song for me is the coda, where they pick up the tempo, and you get Ringo singing in that part. It sounds great. It's a great tune, and a great kind of way to kind of build you up to a nice high point as you're coming toward the end of the album. And I love the bits of studio chatter at the end with Ringo is Lordy Lordy, and all that. It's a lot of fun. Leaves you in a very upbeat, happy place as you get to that, and then you have sort of the palate cleanser at the end with Great Day, which is another great song. Just Paul on his guitar, very prominent backing vocals from Linda. And of course, it's an old song that goes back to the early 70s and really feels like it could have fit on that first McCartney album, I think. I love the vocals of Paul and Linda together. I always thought that their voices blended together very well. And it's a really outstanding track and a great way to wrap up a great album. So there it is. There's my thoughts on Flaming Pie, one of Paul's best. Absolutely a must-have for any Beatle fan, solo Beatle fan, and anybody who loves great melodic music and great craftsmanship in recording music. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.